Chapter 1. The white-bloomed forest had no right to be this quiet. Alara pressed her palm against the rough bark of an oak, steadying herself as her breath came in shallow gasps. 3 days since she'd fled the village. 3 days since, the magistrate's son had accused her of witchcraft for refusing his advances. 3 days of walking through woods that felt older than memory, where the trees grew so thick that daylight never quite reached the forest floor. She should have stayed on the road. But the road meant witnesses, and witnesses meant the rope. Her fingers were numb with cold, her cloak torn from catching on brambles. The small bag of coins she'd managed to grab from her cottage pressed against her ribs beneath her bodice, everything she owned in the world. And it would barely buy her a week's lodging in the next town. If she could reach it without freezing first. The wind shifted, carrying a scent that made her stomach clench with sudden, primal fear. Blood, not the clean smell of a butcher's shop or a hunter's fresh kill. This was older, richer, like copper left to age in darkness. Alara's survival instincts screamed at her to run. But her healer's training, the very thing that had damned her as a witch, made her move toward the scent instead. Someone might be hurt, dying, and she couldn't just walk past suffering. Even if stopping meant risking her own neck. She found the source in a clearing she would have sworn hadn't been there moments before. The tree stood at the center. Impossibly ancient, its trunk wider than 3 men standing abreast. Its branches stretched bare and skeletal against the twilight sky. And at its roots lay a man, or what had once been a man. He was dressed in clothes that belonged to no era she recognized. A long black coat with silver fastenings. A shirt of silk so fine it seemed to shimmer even in the dim light. His hair was dark as midnight, falling across a face that would have been beautiful if it weren't covered in blood. So much blood. It pooled beneath him, seeping into the earth around the tree's roots. His throat had been torn open, the wound vicious and deliberate. No animal had done this. Animals didn't leave claw marks in perfect sets of 5. Alara should have run then. Should have turned and fled back into the forest, and never looked back. Instead, she knelt beside him, his eyes opened. They were gray as winter storms, and wholly aware. He looked at her with an intensity that made her breath catch, and when he spoke, his voice was a rasp that shouldn't have been possible with his throat destroyed. Foolish girl, run. The wound was already closing. Alara watched in horror and fascination as flesh knit itself together. As the terrible gash in his throat sealed from the inside out, the blood stopped flowing. His breathing, which had been a wet, rattling thing, smoothed into something almost normal. Not normal. Nothing about this was normal. You're not human, she whispered. A bitter smile curved his lips. No, and you should have listened. He tried to sit up, wavered, and collapsed back against the tree roots. They're still close. When they catch my scent again, they'll come back to finish it. You don't want to be here when they do. Who? Alara's hands moved without conscious thought, checking his chest for other wounds. She found 3 deep punctures over his heart, still sluggishly bleeding. Who did this to you? My brothers. The word dripped with venom. Or what passes for brothers among my kind. House politics. You wouldn't understand. No mortal would. House politics. Brothers who weren't brothers. Wounds that healed before her eyes. Vampire. The word rose in her mind with terrible certainty. She'd heard stories all her life, village tales told to frighten children, warnings about the old families who lived in the mountains, legends of blood debts and night courts. She'd never believed them. She believed now. I can help you, she heard herself say. I have some skill with healing. Your mortal medicines won't work on me. But his eyes tracked her movements as she pulled bandages from her bag, as she tore strips from her already ruined cloak. You should save your supplies. You'll need them when you run. I'm not running. Then you're a fool. I've been called worse. Alara pressed the cloth against the puncture wounds, applying pressure even though she knew it was probably useless. Her hands were steady despite the fear singing through her veins. These aren't healing like the throat wound. Why? He was quiet for a long moment, studying her with those storm gray eyes. Silver, he finally said. The blades were silver. It slows the healing, poisons the blood. I need time. He glanced at the darkening sky. Time we don't have. They'll return with reinforcements once they report back to House Corvus. When they do, how much time do you need? Hours, perhaps until dawn. His jaw tightened. I won't make it that long. Not alone. The forest seemed to hold its breath around them. Alara looked at the vampire, this impossible creature, who should be her death, and made a choice that would alter the course of her life, forever. Then you're not alone, she said quietly. Can you walk? He stared at her as if she'd sprouted wings. Why would you help me? Because someone has to. She met his gaze steadily. And because I have nowhere else to go either. Something flickered in his expression, surprise, perhaps, or the ghost of some emotion he'd thought long dead. He reached up, and his fingers brushed against the tree's bark. The wood seemed to shiver beneath his touch. Then the ancient tree bloomed. White flowers burst from every branch, impossibly delicate, filling the clearing with a scent like moonlight and frost. They glowed faintly in the gathering darkness, casting everything in an ethereal light. The vampire's hand fell away from the bark, and he looked at the blooms with something like wonder. "That hasn't happened in 3 centuries," he murmured. "Not since." He stopped. Across the forest, in a direction Ilara couldn't name, something stirred. As if something ancient and powerful had suddenly taken notice. As if fate had just shifted on its axis, the vampire's eyes found hers again, and in them she saw a terrible understanding. "What have you done?" he whispered. Chapter 2. Sanctuary in Shadows. The white flowers continued to bloom as Ilara helped the vampire to his feet, their petals drifting down like snow in summer. He moved with the careful precision of someone accustomed to hiding pain, one hand pressed against the silver wounds that still wept dark blood onto his shirt. "There's a place," he said, his voice strained. "Not far. If we can reach it before they pick up the trail, then we move now." Ilara ducked under his arm, taking more of his weight than she'd expected. He was solid, real, warmer than she'd imagined a vampire would be. "Which direction?" He pointed north, toward the deepest part of the forest, where the trees grew so dense they seemed to form walls. "Stay close to me. These woods are old, and they remember. They don't always let strangers through." They moved through the darkening forest like ghosts, his halting steps growing steadier as minutes passed. The white flowers seemed to light their path, blooming on trees they passed as if responding to his presence or perhaps to hers. Ilara didn't understand what had happened when she'd touched the ancient tree. Didn't understand why the vampire kept glancing at her with that mixture of wariness and wonder. She only knew that turning back was no longer an option. "What's your name?" she asked softly, partly to distract him from the pain, partly because she needed to anchor this impossible situation in something real. "Kieran." He paused, then added, "Kieran Ashford. Though the name means nothing now. House Ashford fell to centuries ago. Fell? Was destroyed." His jaw tightened. "By House Corvus. The same house whose assassins just tried to finish what they started all those years ago." Ilara's mind raced, trying to make sense of vampire politics she didn't understand. "But you said they were your brothers. We were all brothers once, before the schism. Before some of us chose power over principle." Kieran stumbled slightly, caught himself. "House Corvus believes in dominion. They would see every mortal in these lands bound and collared, kept as cattle. House Ashford believed in balance. In the old covenants that protected both our kinds, and for that, they killed your entire house." "Not my entire house." His voice went flat, emotionless. "Just everyone I loved." They walked in silence after that, the only sounds their footfalls on the forest floor and the distant call of night birds. Ilara's arms ached from supporting his weight, her legs trembled with exhaustion, but she kept moving. Behind them, she could hear other sounds now, the snap of branches, the rustle of movement too large to be animals. The hunters had picked up their trail. "Faster," Kieran urged, his hand tightening on her shoulder. "We're close." The sanctuary appeared between one heartbeat and the next. One moment they were stumbling through dense forest, the next they stood before a structure that shouldn't exist. It was part cliff face, part ancient ruin, with stone walls that seemed to grow directly from the mountainside. Massive doors stood open just wide enough for them to slip through, carved with symbols that hurt Ilara's eyes to look at directly. "Inside," Kieran commanded, his voice suddenly carrying an authority that made her obey without question. Quickly, they crossed the threshold, and the doors slammed shut behind them with a sound like thunder. Ilara heard scratching on the other side, frustrated snarls, but the doors held. More than held, they seemed to drink in the darkness, to strengthen from it. "They can't enter," Kieran said, finally releasing his hold on her and leaning heavily against the wall. "This place is warded. Old magic, older than House Corvus, older than their ambitions." Ilara looked around the space they'd entered. It was a single vast chamber, lit by candles that burned with flames too steady to be natural. The floor was smooth stone, covered in places by rugs that had once been rich, but were now faded with age. Shelves lined the walls, filled with books and strange artifacts. At the far end stood a bed draped in dark velvet, and beside it, a chair positioned near a cold fireplace. Someone had lived here once. Perhaps still did. "This was your home," she said, understanding dawning. "My sanctuary." Kieran pushed away from the wall, moving toward the bed with visible effort. "After House Ashford fell, I needed a place the other houses couldn't find. Somewhere I could sleep through the daylight hours without fear of assassination." He sank onto the edge of the bed, his face pale even in the candlelight. "I never thought I'd bring a mortal here. Why did you?" Ilara set her bag down, already moving toward him with purpose. "Why not just compel me to forget you and run?" "Compulsion doesn't work that way." "It's not." He stopped, studying her with those storm gray eyes. You don't know anything about my kind, do you? Not really. The stories mortals tell are mostly wrong. Then teach me. She knelt before him, reaching for his shirt, starting with whether I can remove this without you trying to eat me. A sound escaped him that might have been a laugh. I'm not going to eat you. Good, because I've had a very long few days. And I'd prefer not to add vampire snack to my list of problems. Alara worked the buttons free with practiced efficiency, trying to ignore the way her hands trembled slightly. Not from fear now, but from something else. Awareness. When she peeled the silk away from his skin, she found a body marked by old scars that shouldn't exist on someone who could heal. The silver wounds over his heart were surrounded by blackened veins, the poison spreading slowly through his system. This is worse than I thought, she murmured. Silver doesn't just slow your healing, it's actively killing you. Yes, Kieran's voice was matter of fact. Which is why I have perhaps a day before the poison reaches my heart. When it does, even I won't survive. Alara looked up at him, at this ancient being who had just saved her life by letting her save his, and felt something shift in her chest. Then we have a day to figure out how to stop it. I told you, she said quietly. You're not alone. Outside, the hunters circled and snarled and waited. Inside, by candlelight, a mortal woman began to tend wounds that should have been beyond healing, while a vampire who had forgotten hope began to remember what it felt like to trust. Chapter 3. The Marks of Survival. Poison was spreading faster than Kieran had admitted. Alara watched the blackened veins creep further across his chest as she worked by candlelight, mixing what herbs she had left with clean water from a spring that bubbled up through the stone floor in the corner of the sanctuary. Her healer's training told her the poultice wouldn't be enough. Silver poisoning in a vampire was beyond anything her mentor had taught her, but she had to try. You're wasting your supplies, Kieran said, though he didn't stop her from pressing the cloth against his wounds. His skin was cooler now than it had been in the forest, and a fine sheen of perspiration covered his brow. Could vampires sweat? Could they die from poison the way mortals did? She was about to find out. Tell me how silver works on your kind, she said, keeping her voice steady and clinical. Everything. If I'm going to help you, I need to understand. Kieran was quiet for a moment, his gray eyes tracking her movements. Then he began to speak, his voice low and measured. Silver disrupts our magic. We're not truly immortal, we're sustained by blood magic, ancient spells woven into our very essence when we were turned. Silver interferes with those spells, unravels them thread by thread, so the poison isn't doing whatever makes you a vampire. Precisely. He winced as she applied more pressure to the wounds. If it reaches my heart, the magic that keeps me alive will collapse. I'll age centuries in moments. Turn to dust. Alara's hands paused. How old are you? 347 years. He said it simply, as if discussing the weather. I was turned during the War of Houses, when every vampire family was choosing sides between Dominion and Covenant. I was 26, mortal, dying of a battlefield wound when Cashin Ashford found me. Cashin? The Lord of House Ashford. My sire. Something painful flickered across Kieran's face. He gave me a choice, death or immortality in service to a cause. I chose the cause. For 3 centuries, I served House Ashford, protected the covenants that kept mortals safe from predation. His jaw tightened. Until House Corvus decided those covenants were inconvenient, Alara resumed her work, processing this information. 300 years. This vampire had been alive when her great-great-grandparents were children. The scope of it made her dizzy. Why did you really bring me here? She asked quietly. You could have compelled me to run. You said it yourself, I'm mortal. I know nothing of your world. I'm a liability. You touched the Omega tree. The words hung in the air between them. Alara looked up sharply. The what? Kieran's eyes were intense, searching her face as if looking for answers written there. The tree in the clearing. It's called the Omega tree, one of the 3 ancient trees that hold the boundaries between the vampire houses. It hasn't bloomed in 3 centuries, not since the night of the massacre when House Corvus slaughtered House Ashford. He reached out slowly, as if afraid she might bolt, and touched her hand. The old legends say the trees only bloom when they recognize an Omega. I don't understand. Neither do I. His fingers were cool against her skin. Omegas are human-born individuals who can influence vampire magic. They're rarer than diamonds, and most don't survive long. Every house wants to claim them, control them, use them as weapons. His grip tightened slightly. When the tree bloomed at your touch, every vampire within 50 leagues felt it. House Corvus felt it. By now, they know an Omega has emerged. The implications crashed over Alara like a wave. They'll come for me. They'll do worse than come for you. They'll wage war to possess you. Kieran's voice was grim. An Omega can tip the balance of power between houses. With you, House Corvus could finally break the remaining covenants, could enslave every mortal settlement from here to the sea. Alara pulled her hand back, her heart hammering. Then why tell me? Why not just use me yourself? Trade me to your enemies for your life. Because I'm not Corvus. The words were soft but fierce. Because House Ashford died protecting mortals' right to choose. Because he stopped. Something vulnerable crossing his features. Because you could have run in that clearing. And you didn't. You stayed. The silence stretched between them, heavy with implications neither seemed ready to name. Finally, Alara returned to tending his wounds, her mind racing. An Omega, a weapon, a catalyst for war. She'd fled her village to escape being burned as a witch, only to discover she was something far more dangerous. The poison, she said, focusing on the immediate problem because it was easier than contemplating the rest. If I'm an Omega, can I do something about it? I don't know. Kieran's voice held a thread of hope he seemed afraid to acknowledge. The legends speak of Omegas who could heal vampires, strengthen blood bonds, even break ancient curses. But the knowledge of how was lost with House Ashford. Then we experiment. Alara met his gaze steadily. Because you're going to teach me about this world, about houses and covenants and whatever an Omega actually is. And in return, I'm going to keep you alive long enough to do it. You're bargaining with a vampire. I'm bargaining with someone who has information I need. She placed her palm over his heart, feeling the sluggish beat beneath cool skin. You said House Corvus will come for me. I need to understand what I'm facing. What I am. Kieran stared at her, and slowly, a smile curved his lips, the first real smile she'd seen from him. It transformed his face, made him look less like a predator and more like the young man he must have been centuries ago. You're either very brave or very foolish. Alara, he paused. I don't even know your full name. Alara Thorne. She kept her hand over his heart, feeling something warm beginning to pulse beneath her palm. And I'm both brave and foolish. My mother always said it would be my downfall, or your salvation, Kieran murmured, his eyes widening as he looked down at where her hand rested. Alara, your hand. She looked down and gasped. Her palm was glowing with soft white light, the same ethereal luminescence as the flowers that had bloomed in the clearing. And beneath her touch, the blackened veins were beginning to recede. Chapter 4. Threads of light. The light pulsed brighter, matching the rhythm of Kieran's heartbeat beneath Alara's palm. She could feel it, a strange thrumming energy that seemed to flow from somewhere deep inside her, through her hand, into his poisoned flesh. The blackened veins retreated like shadows before dawn, crawling back toward the silver wounds as if the light itself was burning them away. Don't stop, Kieran breathed, his voice tight with a mixture of pain and wonder. Whatever you're doing, don't stop. Alara hadn't known she'd started. The glow had simply appeared, as natural as breathing, as if her body had understood what her mind couldn't comprehend. She pressed her palm more firmly against his chest, focusing on that warmth, that pulse of energy. The silver wounds began to close, not with the supernatural speed of his earlier healing, but slowly, deliberately, as if her touch was teaching his body how to fight the poison. The flesh knit together from the inside out, and the darkness that had surrounded each puncture faded to gray, then disappeared entirely. When the last trace of poison vanished, the light in her palm flickered and died. Alara swayed, suddenly dizzy, and Kieran caught her before she could fall. His hands were steady on her shoulders, his face hovering close to hers, those storm gray eyes, wide with something between shock and reverence. How do you feel? He asked, tired. She pressed a hand to her forehead, feeling as if she'd run for miles. Like I've used muscles I didn't know I had. You healed me. His voice was hushed, almost disbelieving. An Omega's power isn't just theoretical, you actually healed silver poisoning. Do you understand what that means? Alara looked at his chest, at the smooth skin where mortal wounds had been moments before. It means I'm more dangerous than I thought. It means you're more powerful than even the legends suggested. Kieran helped her sit in the chair by the cold fireplace, then knelt before her in a mirror of how she'd knelt before him earlier. House Corvus would burn kingdoms to possess what you just did. The other houses, Nightshade, Thornwood, Silvermere, they'd go to war for you. I don't want to belong to any house. The words came out sharper than she intended, edged with the fear she'd been holding back since the clearing. I just want to survive. Then I'll teach you how. Kieran's tone was serious, the levity from moments before replaced by grim determination. Starting with the truth about what you're facing, he rose and moved to one of the shelves, pulling down a leather-bound book that looked ancient enough to crumble at a touch. When he opened it, the pages revealed intricate drawings of trees, symbols, and vampire houses denoted by elaborate crests. The world is divided into 7 vampire houses, he began, settling onto the floor beside her chair like a scholar preparing to lecture. Each house controls territory, has its own laws, its own interpretation of the ancient covenants. House Corvus is the largest and most aggressive. They believe vampires should rule openly, that mortals exist to serve. He pointed to a crest showing a raven with bloodied talons. They're led by Lord Marius Corvus, who was once Cassian Ashford's blood brother before the schism. Alara leaned forward, studying the page. What caused the schism? N Omega. Kieran's finger moved to another page, this one showing a young woman painted in faded colors. Her name was Lyanna. She was Cassian's wife, a mortal who manifested Omega powers after their marriage. Marius wanted to use her to create blood bonds that would enslave mortal populations. Cassian refused. His voice went quiet. The war that followed destroyed everything. What happened to her? To Lyanna? She died defending mortals from Corvus assassins. Her death broke Cassian, broke all of House Ashford, really. We scattered, went into hiding. The covenants she died to protect have been eroding ever since. Kieran closed the book carefully. Until tonight, when another Omega touched the Omega tree and made it bloom, the weight of his words settled over Alara like a shroud. You think I'm like her. I think you're exactly like her. Kieran met her eyes. Which means you're in more danger than you can possibly imagine. Marius won't rest until he owns you or destroys you. Outside, something scratched at the door as a reminder that the hunters still waited. Alara looked at the closed home. At the vampire sitting beside her, who should terrify her, but somehow didn't, and made a decision. Then teach me everything. How to use this power, how to protect myself, how your world works. She straightened in the chair, pushing exhaustion aside. If I'm going to be hunted, I'm going to be dangerous. A slow smile spread across Kieran's face. Careful, Alara Thorne. You're starting to sound like a vampire. Maybe I need to. She managed a tired smile in return. What else do I need to know? Kieran settled more comfortably on the floor. His earlier weakness completely vanished. Vampires feed on blood. That part of the stories is true. But it's not about hunger in the way mortals understand it. Blood carries life force, memories, emotions. When we feed, we're sustaining the magic that makes us immortal. He held up a hand, showing her how his veins ran dark beneath pale skin. We can survive on animal blood, but it's like living on bread and water. Mortal blood is richer, more nourishing. Do you have to kill? No, that's a choice, not a necessity. His voice was firm on this point. The old covenants Cassian established required consent and care. No mortal could be fed from against their will. No mortal could be drained past the point of safety. House Ashford enforced those rules for centuries. Alara absorbed this, her healer's mind, cataloging information. But House Corvus doesn't follow those rules. House Corvus treats mortals as livestock. The words were bitter. They've been systematically breaking the covenants, establishing blood farms, creating thralls mortals mind-bound to serve vampires without question, and an Omega could stop them. An Omega could strengthen the covenants, make them binding on all houses again. Or Kieran's expression darkened. An Omega in Corvus' hands could shatter the covenants entirely, could enable the kind of enslavement Marius has always dreamed of. The implications made Alara's stomach turn. She'd been running from a false accusation of witchcraft, never imagining she was running towards something so much larger, so much more dangerous. How long do we have? She asked quietly. Before they find this sanctuary? Hours, perhaps a day if we're lucky. Kieran stood, offering her his hand. Which means we need to prepare. I'll teach you what I can about Omega powers, about blood bonds and house politics. You'll teach me why the Omega tree responded to you. Alara took his hand, letting him pull her to her feet. His skin was warm again, alive, proof that her inexplicable power worked. I don't know why it responded, she admitted, then we'll figure it out together. Kieran's grip tightened slightly. Because when House Corvus comes, and they will come, we need to be ready. Chapter 5. Blood and Boundariasthi spent the hours before dawn in a strange, intense education. Kieran taught her the hierarchy of vampire houses, showed her maps, marking territories she'd never known existed. He explained blood bonds, how a vampire could forge a connection with a mortal through shared blood, creating TIs that ranged from simple awareness to complete mental domination. He described the night courts where vampire law was enforced, the blood oaths that bound even immortals to their word, the intricate dance of power and protocol that governed his world. Alara listened, absorbed, and asked questions that made him pause and reconsider explanations he'd taken for granted for centuries. So a blood bond requires consent from both parties? She asked, pacing before the cold fireplace as exhaustion and nervous energy warred within her. In theory, Kieran sat in the chair she'd vacated, watching her move with an expression she couldn't quite read. The old covenants required verbal consent, freely given, with full understanding of the bond's nature. But House Corvus has twisted the definition of consent. They claim that accepting food or shelter from a vampire constitutes implicit agreement. That's not consent. That's coercion. Yes, his voice was quiet, which is why House Ashford fought them. Alara stopped pacing, turning to face him. Could you create a blood bond with me, right now? The question hung in the air between them, heavy with implications. Kieran went very still. Yes, But I won't. Why not? Because a blood bond isn't something to enter lightly. He leaned forward, elbows on his knees, his gaze intense. It would tie us together. Let me sense your emotions, your location. I could find you anywhere, protect you better. He paused. But it would also give me influence over you. Your thoughts, your will, I could push them in directions you might not choose on your own. And with an Omega, the bond would be even stronger, unpredictable. Would it make me a thrall? Not if I didn't want it to. His jaw tightened. But the temptation would be there. You're powerful, Alara. More powerful than you realize. A vampire bonded to an Omega gains strength, influence, the ability to challenge even the oldest houses. Cashin and Lyanna's bond made them nearly invincible until Marius found a way to break it by killing her. Alara absorbed this, understanding the warning beneath his words. He was telling her he could hurt her, that the bond she was asking about could be used as a weapon against her. She appreciated the honesty, even as it chilled her. What if I wanted the bond? She asked quietly. What if it was my choice? Kieran's eyes flashed with something: surprise, longing, fear. Why would you choose that? Because you said yourself, House Corvus is coming. If a bond would let you protect me, better. Find me if we're separated. She moved closer, standing before him. I need every advantage I can get, and I trust you. You barely know me. I know you could have compelled me to forget you and run. I know you could have killed me in that clearing and taken whatever power touching the tree gave me. I know you answered my questions honestly, even when the answers made you vulnerable. Alara held his gaze. That's enough. Kieran stood slowly, and suddenly the space between them felt charged, dangerous. A blood bond isn't a spell I cast on you. It's mutual. I would taste your blood. You would taste mine. The magic would recognize the exchange and forge the connection. Would it hurt? No, his voice had gone low, intimate. It would feel. He stopped, seeming to search for words. Intense. Like falling and flying at the same time. Like every nerve in your body waking up at once. Alara's heart was hammering, but she kept her voice steady. Show me. Alara, I'm choosing this. She reached up, pushing her hair away from her neck. Freely, with full understanding. Show me how it works. For a long moment, Kieran didn't move. Then slowly, he raised his hand and traced a line along her throat with one cool finger. Here, he murmured. I would bite here, where the blood flows closest to the surface. It would be quick, controlled. And then his hand moved to his own wrist. You would drink from me. Just a few drops. Enough to complete the exchange. Do it. Not now. Kieran stepped back, and Alara felt the absence of his nearness like a physical loss. Not when you're exhausted and frightened, and I'm still recovering. A blood bond requires clarity, certainty. If we do this, I want you to be sure. I am sure. Then you'll still be sure tomorrow. His voice was gentle but firm. Rest now. Dawn is coming, and I need to sleep through the daylight hours. We'll discuss this again when night falls. Alara wanted to argue, wanted to push the issue, but exhaustion was finally catching up with her. The act of healing him had drained her more than she'd realized, and now that the adrenaline was fading, she could barely keep her eyes open. Where should I sleep? She asked. Kieran gestured to the bed he'd been sitting on earlier. There, it's warded against nightmares. You'll rest well. And you? I'll seal myself in the vault below. He moved toward a section of floor that looked identical to the rest, pressing his hand against the stone. A trapdoor appeared, revealing stairs descending into darkness. Vampires are vulnerable during day sleep. If Corvus breaks through the wards, I don't want to be accessible. The thought of him locked in darkness below while she slept above made something tighten in Alara's chest. What if they come for me while you're down there? They won't get through the wards, but his expression said he was worried about the same thing. And if somehow they do, there's a knife in the drawer beside the bed, silver-edged. It won't kill a vampire, but it will slow one down. He paused at the top of the stairs. Don't open the door for anyone. Don't speak to anyone who calls to you. Corvus vampires can be very persuasive. I understand. Kieran lingered, seeming reluctant to descend. Alara, about the blood bond. I meant what I said. I won't take that choice lightly. I know. She offered him a tired smile. That's why I'm offering it. Something shifted in his expression. Gratitude, perhaps, or the beginning of something neither of them was ready to name. Then he descended into the darkness, and the trapdoor sealed behind him with a sound like a tomb closing. Alara was alone in the sanctuary. Candles still burning with their eternal flames, surrounded by the remnants of a fallen house and the weight of choices she'd never imagined making. She checked the drawer, found the silver knife, and placed it under her pillow. Then she lay down on the ancient bed and fell into dreams of white flowers blooming in darkness, of blood bonds and broken covenants, of a vampire's gray eyes watching her with an intensity that felt like coming home. Outside, the hunters circled and waited, and in the east, dawn broke over a world that didn't yet know an Omega had risen. Chapter 6. The siege begins. Alara awoke to the sound of thunder. Though the sky beyond the sanctuary's high windows was clear, not thunder. Something striking the doors, she bolted upright, heart hammering, reaching instinctively for the silver knife under her pillow. The candles still burned with their steady flames, casting dancing shadows across the stone walls. How long had she slept? The light beyond the windows suggested late afternoon hours, yet before Kieran would wake, another impact shook the doors, harder this time. She heard voices beyond, speaking in a language that sounded like Latin, but older, more guttural. The wards flared, visible for a moment, silvery blue light, tracing the symbols carved into the doorframe. But the light flickered weakly. They were breaking through. Alara slid from the bed, gripping the knife as she moved toward the trapdoor. Should she wake Kieran? Could she even wake him during day sleep? He'd made it sound like he'd be dead to the world until sunset. A voice called through the doors, switching to a language she understood. Little Omega. The words were smooth, cultured, tinged with amusement. We know you're in there. We felt you bloom the Omega tree, felt the surge of power when you healed the Ashford survivor. Come out, and we'll make this easy. Stay hidden, and we'll tear this sanctuary apart stone by stone. Alara pressed her back against the wall beside the sealed trapdoor, mind racing. The wards were weakening. She could see it in the way the blue light stuttered with each impact. Once the doors fell, there would be nothing between her and House Corvus. We don't want to hurt you, the voice continued, and it sounded almost sincere. You're too valuable for that. Lord Marius wishes to speak with you, to offer you a place of honor within House Corvus. Power, protection, everything a mortal could desire. All we ask is that you come peacefully. Everything a mortal could desire. The words made her stomach turn. Kieran had explained what House Corvus considered honor: being owned, used, drained of her Omega abilities until there was nothing left but an empty thrall. She looked at the trapdoor, at the silver knife in her hand, at the books lining the shelves. Somewhere in this sanctuary was knowledge that could help her, had to help her. Another impact, and this time cracks appeared in the stone around the doorframe. Alara moved quickly to the shelves, scanning titles with desperate speed. Most were in languages she couldn't read, but some were in common tongue. Covenants and blood law, the history of house wars, Omega manifestations, and there she pulled the last one down, flipping through pages frantically. There a chapter on Omega defensive capabilities. Her eyes skipped over academic language, searching for anything practical. And Omega's power stems from their ability to influence the fundamental magic that sustains vampire existence. In moments of extreme duress, this influence can manifest as the doors exploded inward. 3 vampires entered, moving with inhuman grace. They were dressed like Kieran had been, fine clothes from years long past, but where his presence had been controlled intensity, theirs was predatory hunger. The one in front, clearly the leader, had silver blonde hair and eyes like chips of ice. There you are, he said, smiling, with too many teeth. Remarkable. You look so ordinary for someone so extraordinary. Alara backed toward the trapdoor, keeping the knife raised between them. Stay back. Or what? The silver-haired vampire took a step forward. You'll cut me? With that little silver blade? He laughed. Child, I'm 400 years old. I've survived wars, assassinations, and the fall of empires. You think a kitchen knife scares me? I think you should be more worried about what I can do without the knife. Alara's voice was steadier than she felt. The book had mentioned defensive capabilities, but she had no idea how to access them. The vampire's smile widened. Ah yes, the healing. Very impressive. But that won't help you now we're not injured. And your vampire protector is locked underground, trapped in day sleep while we take what Lord Marius wants. He moved forward in a blur of speed. Alara reacted on instinct, throwing up her hand in a warding gesture, and white light exploded from her palm. The vampire screamed, his flesh smoking where the light touched him. He stumbled backward, and the 2 behind him hissed, shielding their eyes. Alara stared at her glowing hand in shock. She'd done it. Somehow, she'd actually done it. She's manifested a ward. One of the other vampires snarled. Marius said she might be able to. I don't care what Marius said. The silver-haired one snapped, his face already healing from the burns. We're taking her. Now. They spread out, circling her with the coordination of practiced hunters. Alara kept her hand raised, but she could feel the light flickering. Whatever she'd done, she didn't know how to sustain it. Last chance, Omega, the leader said. Come peacefully, or we'll drag you out unconscious. Either way, you're leaving with us. No, the word came from behind Alara, from the trapdoor that was suddenly, impossibly open. She's not. Kieran rose from the darkness below, and he was different. His eyes had gone completely black, no white visible. His movements were fluid, dangerous, and when he smiled, his fangs were fully extended. This wasn't the controlled scholar who'd taught her about houses and covenants. This was something older, something that had survived 3 centuries of vampire politics through violence and cunning. Ashford, the silver-haired vampire's confidence wavered. You should be day sleeping. How are you awake? Kieran stepped in front of Alara, placing himself between her and the Corvus vampires. Because she woke me. Her fear, her panic, I felt it through the sanctuary's wards. Turns out Omega energy can override even day sleep. His smile was sharp as broken glass. Which means you've just proven she's powerful enough to wake the dead. Marius will be thrilled. We're taking her. You're trying to take her. Kieran's voice dropped to something that made the candle flames shiver. There's a difference. The 3 Corvus vampires attacked as one. What followed was violence so fast Alara could barely track it. Kieran moved like water, like shadow, meeting each attack with precise, brutal efficiency. He caught the first vampire by the throat and slammed him into the stone wall hard enough to crack bone. The second he kicked backward into the shattered doorway. The third, the silver-haired leader, he fought hand to hand. A blur of strikes and counters that sent them both crashing through furniture. Alara pressed against the wall, her glowing hands still raised, watching in horror and fascination. This was what Kieran truly was, beneath the measured words and careful courtesy. This was a vampire who'd survived the fall of his house, who'd spent 2 centuries hiding from enemies who wanted him dead. The silver-haired vampire landed a blow that sent Kieran spinning, then lunged for Alara instead. She reacted without thinking, pressing her glowing palm against his chest as he reached for her. The white light flared bright as the sun, and the vampire screamed, not just in pain and terror. His flesh didn't just burn. It began to crack, to crumble, as if her touch was accelerating his age, turning immortality back into mortality. Kieran grabbed him from behind and hurled him toward the shattered door. Go. Tell Marius what you saw. Tell him the Omega is under House Ashford's protection. Tell him if he wants her, he'll have to go through me. The 3 Corvus vampires fled. The silver-haired one's screams echoing as they disappeared into the forest. Silence fell over the sanctuary, broken only by Alara's ragged breathing. Kieran turned to her, his eyes fading from black back to their normal gray. Are you hurt? She shook her head, unable to speak. He pulled her into his arms, and she went without resistance, burying her face against his chest. He was solid, real, alive. He'd woken from day sleep for her, fought for her, protected her when he should have been helpless. We need to leave, he murmured against her hair. Now, this sanctuary is compromised, and Marius will send more, stronger ones. Where will we go? Somewhere they can't follow. Kieran pulled back, cupping her face in his hands. His expression was fierce, protective, and something more. I know a place. But Alara, what you just did, I aged him. You nearly destroyed him. His thumb brushed her cheek. That kind of power, Marius will never stop hunting you now. Not until he owns you or you're dead. Alara met his eyes, seeing the truth there. Her old life was gone. The quiet healer who'd fled a false accusation no longer existed. In her place stood an Omega, a catalyst for war, a woman whose touch could unmake immortality itself. Then teach me to fight, she said quietly. Teach me to use this power. Because I'm not running anymore. Kieran's smile was proud and sad and fierce all at once. Pack what you can carry. We leave at sunset. Chapter 7. Into the shadows they fled into twilight. Leaving the sanctuary in ruins behind them, Kieran moved with purpose through the forest, taking paths that seemed to appear and disappear, leading Alara deeper into woods that grew increasingly strange. The trees here were ancient beyond measure, their trunks twisted into shapes that hurt to look at directly, their branches reaching toward a sky that seemed darker than it should be. Where are we going? Alara asked, struggling to keep pace. Her bag was light, she'd taken only the essentials, including the book on Omega manifestations, but exhaustion from the fight still weighed on her. The Vale Woods, Kieran's voice was tense. They're neutral territory, claimed by no house. The magic here is older than vampire politics, and it doesn't take kindly to those who bring violence into its domain. Then how are we bringing violence? We're not bringing it. We're fleeing from it. He glanced back at her, his expression softening slightly. There's a difference. The woods can sense intent, as if in response to his words, the path before them lit with pale blue light not from any visible source, but from the moss growing on the trees themselves. It formed a glowing trail leading deeper into the forest. The woods are guiding us, Kieran murmured, wonder touching his voice. They haven't done that since he stopped himself. Since when? Since Lyanna walked these paths with Cashin. He reached back, taking her hand. They recognize you. Omega energy resonates with old magic. His hand was warm in hers, steady and grounding. Alara held on tight as they followed the luminous trail, questions tumbling through her mind. The fight in the sanctuary replayed itself in fragments the way her power had erupted when she'd needed it. The look of terror on the silver-haired vampire's face. The way Kieran had woken from day sleep because he'd felt her fear. You said you felt me through the wards, she said. How is that possible without a blood bond? Kieran was quiet for several steps. I don't know. It shouldn't be possible. But when those vampires broke through, when you panicked, he shook his head. It was like someone drove a spike through my chest. I woke instantly, completely aware. Every instinct I have was screaming that you were in danger, and you came for me. I'll always come for you. The words were simple, absolute. That's what House Ashford means, what it always meant. We protect those who can't protect themselves. And you, he squeezed her hand gently. You may be powerful, Alara, but you're still learning. Still vulnerable. I aged that vampire. The memory made her queasy. I felt him crumbling under my hand, felt his centuries catching up to him. If you hadn't thrown him away, I might have turned him to dust. Kieran stopped walking, turning to face her. The blue glow of the moss cast his features in sharp relief. Yes, that's the other side of Omega power. You can heal, sustain, strengthen vampire magic, or you can unmake it entirely. You can give immortality or strip it away. That's terrifying. That's why Marius wants you so badly. His expression was grim. An Omega who masters both sides of their power could reshape the entire vampire world, could end bloodlines with a touch, or forge new ones. You're not just a weapon, Alara. You're a walking apocalypse to vampire society. The weight of his words settled over her like a burial shroud. Is that what Lyanna was? Lyanna never learned to destroy. Kieran started walking again, pulling her gently along. She only ever healed, only ever strengthened bonds. That's why Marius was able to kill her. She couldn't bring herself to use her power as a weapon, even when it would have saved her life. Do you think I should? I think you should learn everything you're capable of. He navigated around a fallen tree that seemed to shift aside at their approach. And then choose for yourself what kind of Omega you want to be. But yes, if it comes down to using your power to destroy or letting Marius turn you into a thrall, his jaw tightened. Burn them all to dust. They walked in silence after that, following the blue trail deeper into the Vale Woods. The sounds of normal forest faded, replaced by whispers that might have been wind, or might have been voices speaking in languages long forgotten. Alara saw shapes moving between the trees, not vampires, but something else. Something that watched with curious eyes and made no move to approach. What are those? She whispered. The old ones. Spirits who lived here before vampires, before mortals. Kieran's voice held respect. They're why the Vale Woods remain neutral. No vampire house is foolish enough to claim territory where the old ones dwell. One of the shapes drifted closer, vaguely humanoid but made of mist and starlight. It regarded Alara with eyes like distant galaxies, then reached out a translucent hand toward her. Kieran tensed, stepping protectively closer. But the old one simply touched Alara's forehead with one finger. Images flooded her mind. She saw the Omega tree in full bloom. Not just with white flowers, but with fruit that glowed like captured moonlight. She saw Lyanna standing beneath it, her hands raised, creating bonds of light between vampires and mortals. She saw Cashin kneeling before her, offering his blood freely, forging the first true covenant bond. And she saw what came after, Marius and his followers attacking in the night, breaking the bonds one by one, killing everyone who stood between them and control. She saw Lyanna die with light still blazing from her hands, using the last of her power not to destroy her attackers, but to scatter the surviving Ashford vampires across the realm, hiding them in sanctuaries warded against Corvus's sight. When the vision faded, Alara found herself on her knees in the moss, tears streaming down her face. Kieran knelt beside her, holding her steady. What did you see? He asked softly. Everything. Her voice broke. I saw her die. Saw what she did to save your house. Saw. She looked at him. You were there. You fought beside Cashin. You tried to reach Lyanna before the blade struck. Kieran's expression shattered into something raw and grieving. You shouldn't have had to see that. The old one wanted me to understand. Alara gripped his arms, feeling the tension thrumming through him. Lyanna couldn't destroy Marius because she'd bonded with him once. Blood recognizes blood. She couldn't unmake what she'd helped create. That's why she died. Kieran's voice was hollow. She was too merciful, too bound by bonds she'd forged in good faith. But I'm not bonded to anyone yet. Alara met his eyes. Which means I can destroy Marius if I have to. If I learn how. Something fierce and protective flared in Kieran's gaze. Then we'll teach you. Starting tonight. He stood, pulling her to her feet. The old one gave you that vision for a reason, to show you what failure costs. To show you that mercy without strength is just another form of suicide. The blue trail pulls brighter, leading them toward a clearing ahead, where an ancient structure rose from the forest floor. It looked like a temple, but built by hands that had never been mortal. Columns of living wood supported a roof of woven branches, and at its center stood another tree smaller than the Omega tree, but similar in its otherworldly presence, the lesser Omega tree. Kieran breathed. I thought it was just a legend. What does it do? It's where Omegas learn to master their power. He approached the clearing cautiously, respect in every movement. Lyanna trained here before she bonded with Cashin. This is where she learned to create blood bonds without losing herself to them. Alara felt a pull toward the tree, the same resonance she'd felt in the clearing where this had all begun. The tree seemed to recognize her, its branches swaying, though there was no wind. Will it teach me? She asked. I don't know. Kieran looked at her, and in his eyes she saw hope warring with fear. But we're about to find out. Alara approached the lesser Omega tree, Kieran a steady presence behind her, and placed her palm against its bark. The tree bloomed with white flowers. And the real education began. Chapter 8. Lessons in Light and Darkness. Lesser Omega tree opened like a book written in sensation rather than words. Alara gasped as knowledge flooded through her, not images this time, but understanding. She felt the fundamental nature of vampire magic, the ancient spells woven into their blood when they were first turned. She sensed how those spells connected to life force, to memory, to the thin thread of immortality that kept them suspended between living and death, and she felt how her touch could strengthen those threads or sever them completely. Alara. Kieran's voice seemed distant, though he stood just behind her. What's happening? She couldn't answer. The tree was teaching her in a language beyond speech, showing her the patterns of power that flowed through an Omega's blood. She saw how Lyanna had created bonds that elevated both vampire and mortal, forging partnerships based on mutual benefit rather than domination. She understood now why the covenants had been so powerful. They weren't just rules. They were magical contracts reinforced by Omega energy, but the tree showed her the other side too. She felt how to unravel vampire magic, how to reach into the spell work sustaining immortality and pull it apart thread by thread. It would be easy, terrifyingly easy. A touch, a surge of will, and she could reduce any vampire to dust, regardless of their age or power. The knowledge felt like holding a blade that could cut in any direction. When the tree finally released her, Alara stumbled backward into Kieran's arms. He caught her effortlessly, steadying her as the clearing spun around them. I understand now, she whispered. Why? Marius wants me. Why? You're afraid of what I could do. What did the tree show you? Kieran's hands were gentle on her shoulders, grounding her in the present moment, everything an Omega can be. She turned in his arms to face him, seeing him with new clarity. She could feel his magic now, the ancient spells Cashin had woven into him 3 centuries ago, the blood bonds connecting him to House Ashford even though the house was scattered and broken. I can see you, Kieran. Really? See you. The magic that makes you immortal, the bonds you carry. She stopped, her breath catching. The loneliness. You've been alone for so long. His expression shuddered. Alara, it's not pity. She placed her hand over his heart, feeling the slow, steady beat beneath her palm. It's understanding. You've spent 2 centuries hiding, watching everyone you love turn to dust or scatter to the winds. You've survived by being careful, controlled, never letting anyone close enough to hurt you again. You learned all that from a tree? His voice held forced lightness, but she could feel the truth of his emotions now, the fear and hope warring beneath his careful control. I learned how blood bonds work. Alara didn't move her hand. How they create channels between vampire and mortal, letting emotions and intentions flow both ways. Lyanna bonded with dozens of vampires, creating a network that let House Ashford coordinate perfectly, trust completely. That's why Marius had to destroy her. She'd made House Ashford invincible through connection, and that's what you want to recreate. Kieran's hands tightened on her shoulders. Alara. Those bonds made her vulnerable. Every vampire she was connected to became a potential weakness Marius could exploit, only because she tried to save them all. Alara met his eyes steadily. But what if I bonded with just one? What if, instead of spreading myself across dozens of connections, I focused everything on a single, unbreakable bond? The silence stretched between them, heavy with implications. You're talking about bonding with me, Kieran said quietly. I'm talking about partnership. She could feel his magic responding to her proximity, reaching toward her like a flower turning to sunlight. The tree showed me how to create a bond that enhances both parties without domination, how to share power without losing autonomy. But it requires absolute trust on both sides. I already trust you, and I trust you. Alara's hand moved from his heart to his face, cupping his cheek. So teach me. Show me how to forge a bond that Marius can't break. Help me become strong enough to face him. Kieran closed his eyes, leaning into her touch. When he opened them again, they held a mixture of desire and fear that made her breath catch. If we do this, there's no going back. You'll feel everything. I feel every memory, every regret. 3 centuries of loss and violence. And I'll feel your fear, your determination, your mortality ticking away like a clock I can't stop. I'm not afraid of your past. Her thumb brushed along his cheekbone. And you shouldn't be afraid of my future. I'm terrified of your future. The admission came out raw, honest. Because every possible version of it ends with you in danger. Either Marius captures you and breaks you, or you fight him and risk destruction, or you run forever and never have a life of your own. I've been trying to find a fourth option since the moment you touched that tree, and I can't see one. Then maybe we create one together. Elara smiled softly. Isn't that what bonds are for? Facing impossible odds with someone who won't let you fall? Kieran pulled her closer, resting his forehead against hers. You make it sound simple. It is simple. Not easy, but simple. She could feel his magic intertwining with hers already, drawn together by proximity and intention. We bond. You teach me to fight like a vampire. I teach you to hope like a mortal. And when Marius comes, because he will come, we face him together. And if we fail, then we fail together. Elara's voice was steady. But I don't plan on failing. A sound like distant thunder rolled through the Vale Woods, a reminder that House Corvus was still hunting, still gathering forces. Kieran's head snapped up, his expression hardening into something predatory. They're closer than I thought. Marius must have sent trackers. He looked back at the temple structure. This place will hide us for tonight, but by tomorrow they'll have found a way through the old one's protection. We need to bond now, or not at all. Now, Elara said without hesitation. Kieran studied her face for a long moment, searching for any hint of doubt. Finding none, he nodded slowly. Then we do this properly. The way Cashin taught me, with full consent and clear intention, he led her to the center of the temple, where the lesser omega tree's roots formed a natural circle. Kneel here. She knelt, and he knelt facing her, taking both her hands in his. A blood bond requires 3 things, he said formally, his voice taking on the cadence of ritual. Blood freely given, words of intention clearly spoken, and acceptance of the bond's consequences, whatever they may be. His eyes held hers. Elara Thorn, do you offer your blood willingly, understanding that this bond will tie us together for as long as we both exist? Her heart hammered, but her voice was clear. I do. Do you accept that my memories will become yours, my emotions will echo in your heart, and my enemies will hunt you as they hunt me? I accept. Do you understand that once forged, this bond cannot be broken except by death? She thought of the magistrate's son, of her burned cottage, of the life she'd lost. Then she thought of white flowers blooming in darkness, of a vampire who'd chosen to protect her when he could have used her, of a future that terrified and thrilled her in equal measure. I understand, she said. And I choose this freely. Kieran's expression shifted into something reverent and fierce. Then I accept your offer, and offer mine in return. He raised her hand to his mouth, his fangs extending. This will hurt for just a moment. I'm not afraid. He bit gently into her wrist, and the world exploded into sensation. Chapter 9. Forged in blood. The moment Kieran's fangs pierced her skin, Elara understood why he'd called it intense. Pain flared bright and sharp, then dissolved into something else entirely, a sensation that raced through her veins like liquid starlight. She felt him drinking, felt her blood flowing into him, and with it came a connection so profound it stole her breath. His emotions crashed into her like waves against stone. 3 centuries of loneliness. The agony of watching House Ashford fall, of holding Cashin as he crumbled to dust after Lyanna's death, broke him. The long years of hiding, of survival without purpose, of continuing to exist because he'd made an oath to his sire that he would preserve what House Ashford had stood for, and beneath it all hope. Fragile and terrifying, sparked to life the moment she'd knelt beside him in that clearing and refused to run. Kieran released her wrist, his eyes now completely black with blood magic. He bit into his own wrist without hesitation, dark blood welling from the wound. Your turn, he said, his voice rough with emotion. Drink, and let the bond complete. Elara took his wrist with trembling hands and pressed her lips to the wound. The taste was nothing like she'd expected, not copper or salt, but something rich and complex, like wine aged beyond measure. Power flooded her mouth, her throat, spreading through her body with each swallow. She felt his magic recognizing hers, felt the ancient spells woven into his blood, reaching for the omega energy that made her what she was. The bond snapped into place with the force of a lightning strike. Suddenly she could feel everything, his heartbeat matching hers, his magic intertwining with her power, his thoughts brushing against her mind like whispered secrets. She gasped, releasing his wrist, and found him staring at her with wonder and something deeper. Elara, he breathed. I can feel you. Your courage, your fear, he stopped, seeming overwhelmed. You're brilliant. Like a star burning in darkness. She could feel him too, could sense the predator and the protector warring within him, could feel how much control it took for him to remain gentle when every instinct screamed at him to keep her close, to guard her against all threats. And beneath that desire, not just physical, though that was present, but a longing for connection, for partnership, for someone who saw all of him and didn't run. This is what Lyanna gave Cashin, she whispered. This is why they were invincible together. Yes, Kieran pulled her into his arms, and the bond amplified everything, the warmth of his embrace, the steady strength of him, the way their magic sang in harmony. But our bond is different, stronger. You're not just connected to me, you're enhancing everything I am. I can feel my magic growing, adapting, becoming more than it was. Alara buried her face against his neck, overwhelmed by the intensity of shared sensation. And you're grounding me. All that power the tree showed me, I can feel you helping me control it, shape it, make it manageable. They stayed like that for a long moment, learning the contours of their new connection. The bond was a living thing between them, constantly adjusting, finding equilibrium. She could sense his thoughts if she focused, though they remained distinct partnership, not possession. Just as she'd wanted. Then the distant thunder grew closer, and Kieran's arms tightened around her. They're almost here, he said, his voice hardening. I can feel. He stopped, his eyes widening. Alara, through the bond, I can feel your omega power. I can access it. What do you mean? Touch my hand. She placed her palm against his, and white light flared between them, not just from her, but from him as well. The bond was letting him channel her omega abilities, letting him use power that should have been hers alone. This changes everything, Kieran said, staring at their joined hands. Marius thought an omega would make him powerful, but a bonded omega, sharing power with a vampire who knows how to fight, a fierce smile crossed his face. We might actually survive this. The temple shuddered as something struck its outer wards. How many? Alara asked, feeling through the bond that Kieran could sense the attackers in ways she couldn't. Too many. His expression darkened. Marius sent a full hunting party. 8 vampires, all older than the ones who attacked the sanctuary. And his jaw clenched. He came himself. I can feel his presence. He wants you badly enough to risk the Veilwoods personally. Fear spiked through Alara. And immediately she felt Kieran's steady calm flowing through the bond, anchoring her. I won't let him take you, he said, with absolute conviction. But we need to be smart. The temple's wards will hold for a few more minutes, but once they fall we fight. Alara stood, pulling him up with her. The bond hummed between them, and she could feel his battle readiness sharpening her own instincts. You handle the hunters. I'll face Marius. Absolutely not. Kieran's voice was flat. Marius is 400 years old, and has no conscience. He'll kill you without hesitation. He wants me alive, you said so yourself. Which means he'll hesitate, try to capture rather than kill. Alara met his eyes. That gives me an advantage. And with the bond, you'll know if I'm in real danger. You can reach me before what? Before he breaks your mind? Turns you into a thrall? Kieran gripped her shoulders. I just found you. I just bonded with you. I'm not losing you to him. And I'm not letting you face 8 vampires alone. She covered his hands with hers. We're bonded now, Kieran. That means we're stronger together than apart. Trust the connection. Trust me. Through the bond, she felt his fear for her warring with his tactical mind. He knew she was right. Splitting their enemy's attention was smart strategy. But every protective instinct he possessed rebelled against letting her face Marius. There has to be another way, he said. There isn't. Alara pulled his face down to hers, kissing him fiercely. The bond flared bright with shared emotion, fear and determination, and something deeper that neither had words for yet. When she pulled back, her voice was steady. I'm an omega, Kieran. I can unmake him if I have to. The tree showed me how. That kind of power, using it to destroy it, changes you. Then it changes me. She felt the wards beginning to crack. But I'd rather change than let Marius enslave every mortal in these lands. Wouldn't you? Kieran closed his eyes, and she felt his surrender through the bond. Not defeat, acceptance. Trust. Stay close to the tree, he finally said. Its power will amplify yours. And if anything goes wrong, anything at all, I'll feel it. I'll come for you. I know you will. She squeezed his hands. That's why this is going to work. The temple wards shattered with a sound like breaking glass. 8 vampires poured through the entrance, moving with predatory grace. And behind them, walking with the casual confidence of someone who'd never known defeat, came Lord Marius Corvus. He was beautiful in the way ancient things were beautiful, terrible and cold and perfect. Silver hair fell past his shoulders, and his eyes were the color of ice. When he smiled, it held no warmth at all. There you are, he said, his voice smooth as poisoned honey. The little omega who's caused me so much trouble. His gaze flicked to Kieran, and his smile widened. And you've bonded with Ashford's last survivor. How deliciously poetic. Lyanna would be proud. Don't speak her name, Kieran snarled, moving to place himself between Alara and Marius. You lost the right when you murdered her. I freed her from the burden of choice. Marius's expression didn't change. She couldn't bring herself to use her power properly, so I removed her from the equation. The world is better for it. The world is bleeding because of it. Alara stepped forward, standing beside Kieran rather than behind him. Through the bond, she felt his pride in her courage. You broke the covenants. You enslaved mortals. You turned everything House Ashford built into ashes. I evolved what Ashford started. Marius's eyes fixed on her with predatory interest. And you're going to help me finish it. Come peacefully, little Omega, and I'll let your bonded vampire live. Resist, and I'll make you watch while my hunters tear him apart. Alara felt power rising within hers and Kieran's intertwined. Amplified by their bond, I have a counter-offer, she said quietly. Leave now, and I won't unmake you where you stand. Marius laughed, and the hunt began. Chapter 10. White flowers in the dark. The battle erupted with brutal efficiency. Kieran moved like death incarnate, meeting the 8 hunters with a ferocity that shocked even Alara. Through their bond, she felt his tactical mind working at impossible speed, assessing threats, exploiting weaknesses, using 3 centuries of survival instinct to turn their numbers against them. He caught the first hunter mid-lunge and used the vampire's own momentum to hurl him into 2 others. The impact sent all 3 crashing through one of the temple's wooden columns, but Marius moved toward Alara with the unhurried confidence of someone who'd already won. You threatened to unmake me, he said, circling her slowly. But do you truly understand what that means? To reach into another being's magic and tear it apart? To feel their centuries collapsing, their memories dying, their very essence unraveling beneath your fingers? His smile was cold. It destroys the destroyer as surely as the destroyed. Lyanna knew that. It's why she died rather than fight back. Alara backed toward the lesser Omega tree, feeling its power thrumming through the ground beneath her feet. Through the bond, she felt Kieran's awareness of her even as he felt his silent encouragement, his absolute faith that she could do this. Lyanna died because she'd bonded with you once, Alara said, her hand finding the tree's trunk behind her. Blood recognizes blood. She couldn't unmake what she'd helped create without destroying part of herself. Clever girl, Marius's eyes gleamed. You've learned quickly, but that knowledge won't save you. You're unbonded to me, yes, but you're also untrained. Raw power without discipline is just chaos waiting to collapse. He moved faster than thought, suddenly standing inches from her. Let me teach you discipline. Let me show you what an Omega can truly accomplish when properly guided. His hand reached for her face. Alara grabbed his wrist, and white light exploded between them. Marius screamed a sound of pure shock more than pain as her power crashed into his magic. She felt his immortality beneath her touch, felt the ancient spells woven into his blood by whatever vampire had turned him for centuries ago. The magic was old, complex, layered with centuries of blood bonds and broken oaths, and she could tear it all apart. The tree behind her pulsed with power, feeding her strength, showing her exactly how to unravel Marius's immortality thread by thread. She saw how to do it, saw the pattern, the sequence, the precise way to pull his magic apart from the inside out. But she also felt what it would cost. The tree's knowledge came with a warning. Destruction changed the destroyer. To unmake another being's magic required putting pieces of herself into the void. Left behind, she would carry fragments of Marius's memories, his cruelty, his 4 centuries of calculated violence. They would become part of her, staining her Omega power with darkness. Through the bond, she felt Kieran's terror as he sensed her hesitation. He was fighting 3 hunters at once, unable to reach her, but his thoughts blazed clear. Don't do it. Don't sacrifice yourself. We'll find another way. You can't. Marius hissed, his face twisted with pain as her power continued to burn him. You're too pure to mortal. You don't have the stomach for what it takes to destroy me. Alara looked into his ice-cold eyes and made her choice. She didn't unmake him. Instead, she did something the tree had shown her that Lyanna had never attempted. She broke his blood bonds, every connection Marius had forged with his house, every vampire sworn to serve him, every thrall bound to his. Well, she found the threads of those bonds and severed them with surgical precision. It was like cutting puppet strings, and the backlash hit Marius like a physical blow. He staggered backward, his eyes going wide with shock. What did you? I freed them. Alara's voice was steady despite the exhaustion crashing over her. Every vampire you bound, every mortal you enslaved, they're not yours anymore. The effect was immediate. In the temple, the 8 hunters suddenly stopped fighting, confusion rippling through them. Without Marius's bonds directing them, they were individuals again, vampires who'd been pressed into service by blood oaths they could no longer feel. One of them looked at Marius with dawning horror. You bound us. All these years, you bound us without consent. I made you strong, Marius snarled, but his voice had lost its certainty. Without his web of bonds, he was diminished, still powerful, still ancient, but no longer the center of an empire. Kieran appeared beside Alara, bloodied but victorious, his arm going around her waist to steady her. Through the bond, she felt his pride and relief warring with concern for her exhaustion. It's over, Marius, Kieran said quietly. Your house just fell. Without blood bonds to hold it together, Corvus will tear itself apart within days. Marius's expression twisted into something ugly. This isn't over. You think breaking bonds changes anything? I'll rebuild. I'll bind them again, properly this time. His eyes fixed on Alara with pure hatred. And I'll make you watch while I turn your precious vampire to dust. He moved with desperate speed, silver blade appearing in his hand, the same kind that had nearly killed Kieran. But Alara was faster. She caught his wrist mid-strike, and this time she didn't hesitate. She reached into his magic, found the spell that gave him speed, and unraveled just that single thread. Marius froze mid-motion, suddenly moving at mortal speed. Kieran used the opening to drive his own blade through Marius's shoulder, pinning him against the temple's floor. You wanted to know what an Omega can do, Alara said softly, kneeling beside Marius's struggling form. We can give power, or we can take it away. We can forge bonds that elevate both parties, or break bonds that enslave. She placed her hand over his heart, feeling his ancient magic fluttering beneath her palm. And we can teach old vampires new lessons about consent. She unraveled another thread, his ability to compel mortal minds, then another, his enhanced healing. With each thread she pulled, Marius diminished. Not destroyed, but reduced. Made less than he'd been. Stop, he gasped. You're turning me mortal. I'm teaching you what it feels like to be powerless. Alar's voice was cold. Every mortal you enslaved felt this way. Helpless, vulnerable, terrified. She pulled one more thread, his immortalities. Protection against aging, and watched as the first hints of mortality began to touch his features. Now you'll spend however many decades you have left remembering what you've done. Kill me, Marius said, and for the first time, there was genuine emotion in his voice. If you have any mercy, kill me. Don't leave me like this. I'm not Lyanna. Alara stood, swaying slightly as exhaustion finally caught up with her. I don't have to choose between mercy and strength. I can be both. She looked at the freed hunters, at vampires who were remembering what it felt like to choose their own paths. Take him. Put him somewhere he can't hurt anyone. Let him live with what he's done. Through the bond, she felt Kieran's fierce approval, his absolute certainty that she'd made the right choice. The freed vampires moved to collect Marius, who'd gone silent and still, his ice-cold eyes now reflecting something that might have been fear. As they dragged him from the temple, Alara collapsed into Kieran's arms. I've got you, he murmured, lifting her effortlessly. You were magnificent. I broke him without destroying him, she whispered against his chest. That was right, wasn't it? That was perfect. Kieran carried her toward the center of the temple, where the lesser Omega tree's flowers bloomed brighter than ever. You found a third path, not Lyanna's mercy or Marius's cruelty, but something new, something better.